Hey friends, welcome to the Arable Leader podcast with me, Karl Martin. And today, this episode is going to be great because I get to talk to Dane Sanders. This is the Arable Leader podcast. I'm Karl Martin, and we're exploring true, brave, kind, curious leadership, leading from your soul. So today we've got Dane Sanders, who is having a conversation with me. And, I've looked through all the material about Dane and I've listened to a number of things and I have no idea how to introduce him because he's a multifaceted international man of mystery with so many irons and so many fires. So Dane, take it away, introduce yourself.
Karl, some people just call that someone who's confused, and it's not far off, but let me do my best.
I'm not sure you're confused.
My wife Tammy and I have 4 adulting children. We live in Southern California, been here for a long time. I have a very eclectic background, which was, again, just me trying to find my way forward over the years. And the season I'm finding myself in now that I'm very grateful for is I have a chance to lead a thing called, I'm the Vice President of Employee Development and Performance at a digital agency here in Southern California called Common Thread Collective. And in that work, I think very carefully about human flourishing and how do you create an environment where people are motivated not just in the short term, but for the long term. I think a lot about things like self-determination theory and the ideas of how do you create an environment where people have agency, where they get better at their job every day, where they have a sense of belonging in their work, in the teams that they're a part of, and as they show up as an individual. And that's some of my background in grad work before that. So the idea of taking those ideas and actually codifying and building a framework where people can do that in the workplace is really meaningful. And a lot of that work came from this community I lead online called Men and Women of Discomfort, which I don't need to worry any of your listeners. Our tagline is, it's probably not for you. So it's totally fine. In fact, if you go to itsprobablynotforyou.com, you'll see all about it. Wow. But the point is simply this, the community, we do life a little unorthodox, and yet the result that comes from that is also uncommon. It's rare. People actually show up very differently in life as a result and find themselves really grateful for it.
That's brilliant. I too have 4 adulting children, 4 girls. So I don't know if you've got any boys that need marrying, and I totally believe in the arranged marriage thing.
Well, sadly, I have a boy and 3 girls, so my future is very poor. I'm in trouble. So
who knows how we go?
Who knows? Who knows?
So Dane, let's start with, we've been doing a series called 5 Capitals, and when we've been looking at the 5 entrustments, the 5 gifts that every human being is given: finance, intellect, physical health, relationships, and spiritual capital. And we've been working through those things and talking about how they relate to one another. And today, I would love to talk to you particularly about the physicality, the physical capital part of this and how you invest in that and why that is important. So just to get into that, tell me the story of how and when you started to go big on or prioritize physical health and why that was.
I was probably in my early 40s, and I was...
You look like you still are. I don't know where I was in my early 40s.
Yeah, I'm not in my early 40s anymore. That was a long time ago. But what was happening was I was in a bit of a malaise. I had done quite a bit. I had written a handful of books. I was speaking in a lot of places, consulting and coaching on the heels of building a little business, and working up until then in day jobs internationally, doing some really fun things, married, happy kids, good home life, and had a sense of is this it? Like, is this as good as it gets? Yeah. And I found myself walking around Newport Beach with a buddy of mine, a guy named Tim, and he's a little younger than me, but was having his malaise early. And as I looked around at my friends and colleagues and just people around town, I realized there was a whole bunch of us who were in that seat. And it wasn't just men, it was women too. But there was a sense in which, is this as good as it gets, was kind of a common denominator. And what ended up happening was I had been an athlete in college and at a pretty high level. But then I kind of found my way to pursue other exploits. And in that process of kind of finding my way forward, I met this guy, Tim, and he said, hey, I think we should go work out. I'm like, all right. So we go to the YMCA, we start working out. But I'm thinking we're going to go for a workout. And he has other ambition. And we start doing other experiments. Like after the workout, we would go to the Pacific Ocean in the middle of winter, go neck deep and stay underwater for a while. Before cold plunges were all the rage, before we heard about Wim Hof. And then, whether it's holding your breath or going on all carnivore diets or ridiculous workout regimes, it was all a lark. It was just a bunch of a middle-aged trope of two bumbling dudes trying to figure out a way to spark some dopamine in their lives. And that's literally all it was. It was vanity driven. There was a whole, but what we discovered in the process was when we chose to do hard things, things that people wouldn't normally raise their hand for, we discovered a little bit of vibrancy, a sense of like something was waking up inside of us. But that's actually not the point of the story. The point of the story was my friend Tim, a couple years into this, he got sick. He got stomach cancer. And in the final year of his life, before he died, what I witnessed was a man more alive than he had ever been in any year I had ever seen him. Wow. And I couldn't understand it while his body was betraying him, while he was about to leave his wife and two boys. And just the way he showed up in that season was remarkable to me. And as we talked, I mean, there's no question he spoke of the centerpiece of his life was his faith. But he also went on to say that he had been practicing for this moment way before this moment. Wow. And that by choosing to do voluntary things that are discomforting, when involuntary things started showing up, he had a capacity available to him that's uncommon. And that's when I realized that we had stumbled onto something together. And I began to try to articulate what that meant and codify things, build out a framework, invite others along. I discovered the community. If you're going to voluntarily suffer, do it together. You might as well do it with some people and make it a lot more enjoyable. And it turns out all my best friends now are people who I regularly suffer with. And it turns out there's a lot of ways to do voluntary discomfort that are very creative and not all physical. But what tends to draw people in is people wake up in their 30s or 40s or whatever, and they go, I remember when I was an athlete, or I remember when I had I saw what delayed gratification and discipline got me in one category, and I've given that up. And they're at a crossroads, and they need to make a decision as to whether or not that is a historical artifact or something that is still possible in their life. Yeah. And if they decide to opt in, well, what's the path forward with that? It just turns out that physicality, embodiment, is really probably what I would call it more, is the easiest way to get into being present and real with the reality that we live in. Wow. If you do it purely cognitively, it's kind of a mind exercise, but you can kind of do that in almost like a trance-like way where it's somehow disconnected from who you are as a whole person. And one of the things I like about the financial, intellectual, physical, relational, spiritual is so comprehensive. You're actually talking about the human condition. Yes. And that kind of broadly faceted view of what it means to be a person, I think has to be accounted for. But of all those things, like I don't always have money. I'm not always the smartest guy in the room. I might not have all my best friends. I might not be in tune with God, but I'll tell you what, I have a body and I can't avoid it. And I find that this is the pathway into all five things. It just gives me a
buy that. I buy that, and I think this is, if you followed any of my journey, I also used to think I still think I'm a kind of an athlete. I don't know what it is about the human brain, but I mean, I still think of my body as if I'm a 25-year-old. And whenever I see England playing football, proper football, not your kind of football.
No. Hey, Harry Kane I'm a fan. I'm a Tottenham fan. So I'm with you, brother.
Well, I'm an Arsenal fan, so we got a problem.
Well, bless your heart. We have to end this podcast immediately. It was good to meet you, Karl. Yeah. Take care.
But here's the deal. I still watch England play and think I could put in a shift. if someone got badly injured and they called me up, I still think I could do a job for them. And now that's total nonsense. I would pull something within 3 minutes, but I still think that. And I've been on this journey saying, and I've gone on the podcast recently saying, it's not all physical, but I am obsessed with the idea that 50% of the way in which people show up is physical.
Yeah.
If I'm not sleeping well, eating well, drinking well, moving my body well, I can't use this well.
That's right.
I can't use this well. I can't relate to people around me. And so it's not that everything is physical, but it is that if it doesn't start there, we've got a problem.
I've heard it said that not everything is physical, but nothing isn't physical.
That's very good. I'm going to steal that, pretend I wrote it, tell everyone about it.
Great.
So here's one of the things that we would teach at Arable, and we talk again and again and again that nothing grows in a comfort zone. The comfort zones are useful. I mean, you can heal in a comfort zone, you can rest in a comfort zone, and those are important things. But if you want to grow, you don't grow in a static state. You grow in a disruption zone. You grow in a creative zone. You grow when you do hard things, I guess. And so I love the idea. You've taken it a stage further and created a whole I guess program around discomfort. Talk to me about the play between team and individual.
Oh gosh!
Because I'm fascinated with there are two things that at Arable I say often. You're the project, basically radical personal responsibility. If the transformation you want to see beyond you has to first happen in you, and we also say there is no such thing as an individual. There is only team. And both of those things are probably overstatements, but both of those things we believe to be true. Talk to me about the play between the personal responsibility and the fact that you do this stuff, this discomfort stuff in a team, and why is that the case?
My view is that it's helpful to begin at an atomic level conversation. And when I think about value and how do you create value, as people, the old adage, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. That's true, but it doesn't mean you're actually going to go far necessarily.
Yeah.
It still requires individuals at all stages to show up a certain kind of way. And this is where, for example, in our community, no one holds anyone accountable. We don't do that. What we do is we create space for people to account. And we invite individuals to show up in that space to declare what's so for them. We're also a virtual community, checking in on an app on a phone. So what people do wherever they do it is really up to them. The people are just going to do what they're going to do. But I'm clear for myself as an embodied individual in Southern California that what I check in on, the act of checking in, the act of accounting, the act of stating this is what I did and did not do, is a critically courageous act. It's an act where I am saying out loud what happened. Yeah. Also, what I intend to go do, and if I deceive or lie, that has no real impact on others. It actually impacts me as an individual primarily. It could impact others later. But what we're talking about here are things like character, integrity, self-control, honesty, courage, action. All of these are individuated tasks. And as those are increasingly embodied by individuals, now I have something of value that I could bring to a collective. Yeah. And what I see one of the central roles of a leader to be is to get really crystal clear on what are we doing together? If we're going to create a collective, what are we trying to accomplish? And as we design that outcome that we're all seeking together, and I articulate it as clearly as possible, then I just want to invite the most valuable contributors to that collective enterprise. And if I come across somebody who might have ambition for the collective goal, but they themselves are not taking personal responsibility as an individual to bring their highest and best to that conversation, I know that we have a weak link in our collective. Yeah. And if I'm serious about the vision and I'm the leader, I want to get real about that individual's contribution. So it gets very pragmatic very quickly. If you're serious about going far in a collective, it's critical that you invite individuals to that conversation that are conscious and committed to showing up with the highest value contribution so that you can make good on this big vision.
Wow.
So those are little preliminary thoughts, but does that resonate or hold together?
Yeah, it's massive. And ultimately, I love that transparency or vulnerability piece, not just because of what it does to the individual as far as I take responsibility for this, but what it does to trust as a whole in a team. I'm obsessed with the idea that if you can't be transparent and vulnerable and bring your best to the table, bring who you are to the table, there can really be no team and no trust in the place. Let me change the conversation just a little bit. Maybe this is just to help me with my coaching dilemmas. But I have a number of high powered, very busy senior executives that I coach who all I think would listen to this podcast if they had time and would say, oh yeah, I agree with that. I need to get myself in shape and, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I have no time because I wake up at 4, I start work at 4:45. I work all day. I'm in different states, flying around, reacting and responding to what's going on. I would love to have a personal trainer, but it's never quite worked for me, and so I'm slightly out of shape. Talk to that guy or that girl and tell them why they should prioritize this, and talk a little bit about margin, if you would.
Yeah, well, if you don't mind, remind me about the margin bit, but I want to hang out here just for a second. So I would argue, if I was in that conversation, you were that person, you were talking to me, I actually would spend zero time trying to convince them that they need to do anything different. Because I would argue that they are absolutely committed to an outcome that they're getting. The system that they're living in is designed perfectly to give them exactly what they've got.
The outcomes they're going to get,
Yeah, and you've heard. And given that reality, their gestures toward, if only I had more time, we all know any sane person pauses and goes, well, every human has the same amount of time, and somebody actually is doing that thing, and you're not. So it clearly isn't about time. So let's take the time equation off. I know that you're busy and self-important, and you're prioritizing things that are very important to you. And as you over-index in those areas, there's a trade, because every decision creates a trade-off. And it sounds like you're clear for yourself that what you're getting is what you want. This is as good as it gets.
Yes.
And if you wanted something different, well, we need to design a different system for that. And I have enough disconfirming data points of very high-functioning leaders who have made radical shifts in how they've oriented their lives and organized their lives to get precisely what you're describing, precisely where they could actually, it's a horrible metaphor, but have their cake and eat it too, where they don't actually create another competing interest that's going to go against all these other things that are competing. They actually create a distinction between their operating system, their practice, how they do life, the immovable objects in their lives. That is actually an immovable space. Almost like on my computer, I have an operating system and I have apps. If I'm just installing another workout app to go along with my, spreadsheets and slide decks and everything else that I'm doing, well, I'm going to run out of RAM. If I'm making more money from that than I am from this, I'll prioritize that and off we go. But if I shut down the operating system, none of the apps work. It all goes away. Yeah. So once you get clear that what we're talking about here is not adding or subtracting from your 24-hour window of time. What we're talking about here is actually an entire reorientation around how it is that you're doing your life. Yes. That's when it becomes a far more interesting conversation. Yeah. And then if someone actually showed interest in that, then I would ask the question, well, what if I could make the case to you that not only would you prioritize sleep, hydration, working out 6 days a week minimum, having all the time you need for family and friends and commitments that are really important to you, and actually increase your capacity in business or in the academy or where it is that you find valuable to serve. And you could do all of that with a greater sense of margin, to your point earlier,
Yes.
and more importantly, kind of a through line of peace, would you want to know about it? If you knew up front that it was going to create a radical interruption to your current lifestyle. And if people are honest, they honestly say they actually would rather not know about it.
Yeah.
But if they're interested, then it becomes a really fun, curious conversation.
And that's where it's really not for everyone, is it? I mean, because some people just don't want to take the trip.
They don't. And I think there's in the early days of this exercise, I used to be very zealous, trying to convince everyone I knew how important this was.
Yeah.
And things really shifted. And again, I give credit to my friend Tim. He was like, why are you trying to convince everyone to do this? It's silly. You're wasting energy trying to enroll people in something they don't want to do. Yeah. Meanwhile, there's all these people who are desperate to go do it, and they're ready to reorient their lives.
Yeah.
But we're not speaking to them because we're trying to convince the wrong people.
And by the law of indirect effort, their lives and the transformation of their lives convinces other people that you would never be able to convince. They become
walking billboards. 100%.
Yeah.
Exactly.
This to me is fascinating because I don't know if you know, I've written a book called The Cave, the Road, the Table, and the Fire, which is really about the fact that cadence beats balance and flow every day of the week. Really, I want to say that work-life balance is a bit of a myth. But
you and I are on the same page.
Well, because the reality is you're a whole human being.
That's right.
And any sense of balance you get comes the far side of rhythm and cadence and habits and the way in which you choose to live your life. And the psychological state called flow comes the far side of a rhythm and pattern of a life well lived. So we have the cave and the road and the table and the fire is the way in which you set yourself. In essence, we're saying leadership is spatial. Find yourself in the right spaces, and you find yourself as the right person. So I buy huge amounts of what you're saying. Let's get very kind of maybe practical, maybe a bit controversial. If you could erase one health myth from public consciousness, what would it be?
A health myth.
Yeah. Like, I mean, this thing is telling me like 24/7, if I believe it and listen to it, that I should do this, shouldn't do that, eat this, drink this, hold my breath in this way, whatever
well, there's
it is.
Of course, there's a whole industry now of optimizers.
What do you go,
hackers.
oh, come on, that's not even true, or I wish we could just ditch that.
Yeah, well, I mean, some of the superficial ones that are really easy to knock out are things like, you don't lose weight in the workout room. You lose weight in the kitchen.
Yeah.
Like, not complicated. That was decided a long time ago. It's just it's caloric intake and how do you adjust for that? Or, there's a great little bit I saw recently. Ryan Holiday posted about he has a cold plunge and he gets into it every day and he's on stage somewhere and he's saying some version of, apparently this is good for your digestive system and resetting your this and that and all that. And he goes, I get in my cold plunge every day and I never, ever do it because of those things. Cause I'm not even sure if they're true. Who knows? Yeah. And if you've been around the world for more than a decade, we've all heard like, oh, this is really good for you. And then you find out, oh, that's really bad for you actually. And we go on these cycles over and over again. And that's mostly a reflection of a market that's turning than it is what's actually helpful for you. But what is consistently helpful is and Ryan hit it on the head. He says, I get in cold plunges because I don't want to get into a cold plunge. Yeah. And every time I get into it, I'm better for it.
Yeah.
And this is backed up by some remarkable science. Huberman recently talked about this idea of a radical breakthrough in neuroscience called the discovery of the anterior mid-cingulate cortex. And the anterior mid-cingulate cortex, if for those listeners who haven't heard yet, are these substructures in your brain that basically expand or grow only when you're doing something that you don't want to do. Yeah. When you're pushing against the resistance. And it turns out that elite athletes, ridiculous people who live really long, but don't just live long, but flourish, especially in old age, whatever, they have disproportionately large anterior mid-cingulate cortexes. Yeah. And the question becomes, well, why do you want to grow one? What would be the purpose? And if you think about it, what the reason, if I really hate cold showers, and then all of a sudden over time I start to love it, my anterior midcircular cortex doesn't grow anymore. It stops. I have to find something else that I don't like and go do that.
Yeah.
So it's less about the cold or the breath hold or the whatever. It's actually more about choosing the thing that you resist, that you know is better for you.
So good.
And I would argue that that's a helpful kind of filter to decide, well, am I going to go do CrossFit, or am I going to go on this keto diet, or am I going to go do it? Like, here's what I've found. Almost all the diets actually work if you do them. Yeah. And if you don't, they don't ever work. Yeah. So, and I think it's a real, this is where these early days, my larks with my friend Tim were so funny. We were just knuckleheads, but it worked. Yeah. And it's funny, our first actual member of our community, the third person in the group, his name was Taylor. He's now my boss. He and I work together as common thread. And he invited me into this VP role specifically to help install MWAD values in a corporate context, which is what got me my role. But Taylor used to be a New York Yankee, and he worked out with the best, he had the best food, the best care, the best coaches, the best this and that and all the things. And we would go to the Y and do these knucklehead, like Olympic lifts. And he'd be like, this is the dumbest workout ever. And this is the dumbest food thing. And we were like, you're right. It's not, because we're not here to optimize or hack. We're actually, just if we could find out you could do a 4-minute ab instead of an 8-minute ab, we would do a 12-minute ab. Yeah. Like you're missing the point. The point is, when you do the uncomfortable thing, you get the better life. Jerzy Gregorek famously said, hard choice is easy life, easy choice is hard life. When you do the hard thing, in almost any category, things get better. You have delayed gratification. M. Scott Peck made this observation years ago, just said this developmental curse, and this is the problem of our age in many ways, is we have instant gratification in all contexts, and then we expect people to have character and long suffering and the capacity to hang through things.
So do hard things. Do hard things.
It's that simple.
Talking about it is talking about it. Doing it is doing it. Do hard things.
That's right.
My nephew is a Dodger, not a Yankee, and I had Thanksgiving with him a couple of years ago, and his personal trainer was out of town, and so he said, "Do you want to come do a workout with me?" And I said, "Yeah, how hard can that be?" And I found out exactly how hard it could be. And particularly, I'm not a huge baseball fan, and I'm going to probably upset a bunch of people. I'm not convinced it's a sport. I think it's a kind of American pastime where you eat hot dogs. But he's a big shot, and he can lift some things. So yeah, do hard things. Do hard things. Final question. Let's make it positive. Let's make it very, very practical. So, Karl Martin, on a health kick, 56 years of age, I think I am now. And I'm pretty keen at doing hard things, making things happen, and hard things in my business, hard things in transition, hard things in my health. If there was one thing, apart from an ice bath, I'm not yet convinced that I need to purchase an ice bath, but maybe I do. If there was one thing that I should think about doing, which I'm probably not going to like doing, what would you say to me for my health that I should embrace?
Yeah, I think, Karl, what I would probably do is, and maybe we should just do it this way. Let's have the conversation. I think I would want to understand a little bit more, because I think these kind of blanket. If I just had a,
I knew you were going to do this. You're going to make it very, very personal, and then I'm going to have to do it.
Well, I actually don't know how to do it otherwise, because there's a sense in which every one of your listeners, every one of them, there's a particularity to their reality. That and we experience this all the time at Men and Women of Discomfort. So the way MWAD works is people make one decision to join, and then we make all their decisions for them for 12 weeks. And of course, you do that for 12 weeks, people get in ridiculous shape. That's the easy residue that comes from taking the cognitive load out, inserting community, and people making good choices. But what's striking to me is the different things that discomfort different people. One person, it's, I can't work out every day. Another person, it's, I can't imagine coffee without creamer. Another person, it's the cold shower. Another person is the breath. Another person, it's just checking in. I don't want to, we have a thing called Friday Fess Up, where everyone in the community gets to get online and communicate where they missed the mark, what they want to do different next time, and what they learned. And people are like, they feel shame. And it's like, okay, this is a shame-free zone. No one's going to beat you up.
Yeah.
But what if you could recreate that something different? So we would probably have a delightful coffee or tea and
no creamer,
and find our way forward to, and usually it doesn't take long before someone goes, oh, ouch, 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 ouch. That's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
And that is the gold. And if you can hug that cactus, that's where you're going to find, that's where you create the most compression. Most compression creates the most growth. It's everything you wrote in your book. And you find your way forward.
I love that. You had me until you said hug the cactus. And then everything in me went, oh. Dane, I think you and I need to jump on another podcast another time and talk about some other things, because I think this is just gold. But I suspect there's some further conversations that you and I can have, which would really move the dial, both for me and I think for our listeners. So thank you so much, my friend. It's been great to have you.
Well, thank you for leading. I want to just call this out because it's so remarkable to me. The opportunities for growth spiritually, relationally, physically, intellectually, financially, all the principles apply in all categories.
Yeah.
And wherever someone finds themselves, they really have a window, like a golden opportunity. And I think the way you are leading people forward is that window. You are the front door, my friend. And I'm so grateful for the ways that you're leading and what you're leading them into. Thank you.
Thank you, my friend.
You've been watching The Arable Leader with Karl Martin. Subscribe for more episodes with great leaders. And you can also listen to The Arable Leader wherever you get your podcasts. For more resources for leading in a healthy way, visit arableco.com and check out Karl's new book, The Cave, the Road, the Table, and the Fire: